special, and I mean a really special, holiday edition of Wrestling with the Future. Tonight, we talk about the master himself and pay tribute to the man called the Dean of Professional Wrestling, Gordon Solie, as told by his beloved daughter. Her name is Pam Allyn, and she is our guest tonight. But before we bring Pam in, let's talk to our guys. Big Ben Scala from Ocala. Benny, you're looking more and more like Professor Irwin Corey, brother.
Yep. That's what I'm going. I'm going for the homeless look, actually, but I'll take Professor Corey.
It suits you well, brother. You look good on it.
I just want people to drive by and give me soup. That's my whole goal in life.
They'll allow me to give you soup on a loaf of bread at that rate. Holy shit. And Dan, the man, Sebastiano, the smartest guy in the room, the happy haberdasher, the man who took a shot at me today, Pam, insinuating that I, as a Santa Claus, would not allow children the opportunity to speak their gifts to me, that I would somehow interrupt them. Now, could you ever see me doing that, Pam? Why are you laughing at me?
Taking a fifth.
Take the fifth.
Laughing at me.
Please the fifth.
Please the fifth.
Yeah,
Yes.
No hoblo and glass.
Well, let me
rephrase that, please?
officially introduce our guest tonight. Tonight, as I said, we remember the master himself, the Dean of Pro Wrestling, Gordon Solie. Gordon was a Florida-based professional wrestling play-by-play announcer, working for Georgia Championship Wrestling from Florida, USA Championship Wrestling, Continental Wrestling, and World Championship Wrestling. He is considered by the masses to be the most credible announcer ever to hold that prestigious position, giving him the moniker, the Dean of Professional Wrestling. He came into this world in 1929, and he went to the big ring in the sky in 2000, and the world of pro wrestling has not been the same since. But we also have a woman that's going to walk us through the life and career of Gordon Solie. She knew him best. She was, in fact, his daughter, Pam Allyn. Pam, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here.
When I promised Ben Scala, I have to tell you, Pam, these guys, they drive a hard bargain. I told Benny, I'm going to give you the first series of questions tonight because he's a pathetic looking guy, Pam. He likes to pout. He's got that big lip that just kind of drools.
Pouty lip. Yep, that's right.
So I'm going to give Benny the first question. Benny, go for it, my friend. You got.
All right,
Pam.
I'm going to pick up my lip from the floor and try to ask you a question there, Pam.
There
It's a
you
pleasure. It's a pleasure to meet you. So, I thought of because I think your dad is just about he is like the god of wrestling broadcasters, and I was trying to think of a good analogy to explain to you how good I thought he was, and it finally came to me. I grew up in Long Island, New York. Got to do my Long Island plug there, LI. So they had something on WPIX Channel 11 called the Yule Log. And the Yule Log every December 24th from 1966, I think till the present, actually. It consists of a 17-second loop of a log burning in a fireplace. And it goes for hours and hours and hours. And I think it actually, Angela, I'm not sure. I think it was actually shot at Gracie Mansion.
Which
is the mayor's house in New York. But
it was.
And people actually watch this Yule Log. And, like I said, for hours, you see a log burning in a fireplace. And I thought, your dad could commentate on that Yule Log and make it sound like the seventh game of the World Series. That's how good he was.
Exactly.
Yeah, he would. He would. I mean, he'd make it its own personality, And
people would be sitting on the edge of their chairs listening to your dad commentate about this Yule Log. So I guess my first question, Pam, is how did your dad go from, and we have a connection. So your dad, I guess, was born in Minneapolis.
Yes.
And he lived in Port Richey.
Yeah, that's what was his last residence.
Okay. So I live in Port Richey, and before I lived in Port Richey for 4 years, I lived in Robbinsdale, which is actually a huge wrestling town, but it is right. You could throw a rock from Robbinsdale and hit Minneapolis. So how did your dad go from, and I guess his real name is Francis Jonard, is it Labiak? I'm probably not pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
How did he go from that to Gordon Solie?
And it's Labiak.
Labiak, okay, sorry.
Yeah, Labiak. Actually, can you see someone signing off? And this is Jonard. Well, actually, he was adopted. Let me go back. He was adopted when he was 8 or 9 by his stepfather, and his last name was Schobel. So my dad had the last name of Schobel because back then it was like, you don't have kids with different names in a family.
Right.
So to lean some legitimacy to it. And he became Jonard Pierre Schobel, and Pierre was my step-grandfather's first name. And when Dad decided he wanted to go into announcing, even in the early career, he couldn't see himself saying, and this is Jonard Schobel, I'm saying, so long from the Sunshine State. I mean, that's not gonna work. It would be, people would be going, what? And because I can attest to that, because in class they would come to my name and they'd say Pamela, and they're looking around the room. I'm Schobel, I'm back here. Most people can't even pronounce it, much less spell it. So he took my great-grandmother's maiden name, which was Gordon, and my grandmother's maiden name, his mother, which was Solie, and he became Gordon Solie.
Wow.
And it had a better ring to it. And he had a girlfriend. Well, he had a girlfriend back when my parents were split, and her name was Terry. And so he took her name, Terry, and it became Terrence. And so he became Gordon Terrence Solie. And there you have it.
There you go. Good, Ben.
So how did he actually get to be? My understanding is he was initially a ring announcer down in Florida. How did he get that job, and then how did he morph into being an announcer?
Well, there's a couple stories out there. My grandma always said that he and his dad discovered my dad, and Cowboy Luttrell heard my dad at calling a race at Phillips Field in Tampa. And I've said this many times before. My dad was a much better track announcer. Y'all you wouldn't understand that, but he was amazing. You could close your eyes, just like what you said about him making that fire come alive. You could close your eyes and you knew exactly where they were at on the track, what gear they were going into, what the driver was doing, because Dad called it that way. And Cowboy asked him if he'd be interested in announcing in the ring. And Dad says, oh, yeah. Because the only 2 big sports in Florida at that time, actually 3, because wrestling was just starting, would be auto racing and golf. Yeah, my dad's not a golf announcer. So he took the position, and he said, well, how do you want me to do this? And Cowboy's basic comeback was, like your life depended on it.
Exactly.
So $5 a week, my father went and did all of the ring announcing, which eventually led to him getting to become very good friends with Eddie Graham. And
yeah.
Mike was like my age, or was my age.
Yeah.
And their friendship just spanned the years, and they led one another into it. And Cowboy took both of them under his wings and made them who they are or were at that time.
Absolutely.
So.
You mentioned your father's passion for racing. And a lot of people don't know this, but he was quite skilled as a race announcer. I was able to do something that was hard for me to do, but I was able to pull some audio clips up. I had to go into the archives to do it, but there are, if people are interested in doing it, you can go into, and I think the site that I went into was the North American Stock Car Racing Association. They have an archive, and believe it or not, and it's unbelievable if you listen to it, Gordon Solie calling an auto race. Amazing stuff. Absolutely,
yeah, he could make
amazing.
I'm sorry. It has been said that he could make a blind man see the race.
You know what?
That's
And
how
let's
good he
talk about that, because he had that air of legitimacy, and that was the thing that I don't care who you are, fan or not of the sport. He had this sensibility about him, Pam, to make everything seemed crucial. To quote the Cowboy, like their life depended on it.
Mm-hmm.
It was, and we talked about this before, Dan and Benny, the sensibility of legitimacy, credibility. People believed when he spoke. They believed he was calling a real fight.
Yep.
And so, Dan, why don't you pick up with Pam from wherever you want to go with this, and go for it.
Yeah, Angelo started on that good point, and it's something that's come up on this show many times this year, is the fact that the downfall of a lot of the downfall of the current product is linked to the fact that it's not presented as a real product anymore. Now, obviously, that genie's long been out of the bottle, but you listen to the announcers and they pitch products and they pitch sponsors and they talk about backstage segments and they just sound disinterested, or they're hype. They're clearly reading from a script. I'm wondering if you have, especially with the induction, I want to say it was 2008, somewhere in there, 2007, 2008, when your father was inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the miniseries that Jim Ross produced, bringing up a lot of his, which, from I'm to understand, brought a whole new legion of fans to a product that may not have seen you or had the pleasure of hearing your father announce. I'm curious if you have any opinions on the fact that what your father did, what made your father such a success, has been completely abandoned in the modern era.
He thought it was too. Before he died, he goes, "This is no longer what I started." I mean, he did bring legitimacy to it, credibility. Number one, he didn't know the outcome ever of a match, ever. He's how can I call something I already know the outcome to? It's got to look real to me.
That's really important, Pam, and forgive me for interrupting you, but that's critical, and people don't understand that. They never smartened up Gordon Solie to the finish of a match. Never. Never. When you heard him call a match, that was the first time he saw it, first time he called it. Go ahead, Pam. Thank you.
Yeah. No. Please continue. You were saying that he talked about that not being. I was wondering if you could expand on that. What was his opinion of the product towards the end of his life?
Okay, the big turnoff to him. Do you remember when the NWO did the crucifixion?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh no, he was done at that point. He's done. He says, "I have never been so embarrassed. So, oh my gosh. I mean, my dad may not have, professed his religion or anything out there, but his beliefs were strong. And he said they just took it all away. They made this wrong. He didn't like the way the steroids were being pushed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything changed. Everything changed. The table. First of all, you're not supposed to touch the announcers. You're not supposed to go near the announcers. That was a big thing back in the 60s, I mean, and, of course they played it up because one of them back, not Don Morocco, but someone else had come close to the table and got close to Dad or whatever. And it was written up in one of the wrestling bulletins. But there was supposedly a, what do you want to call it? A declaration brought down from the NWA. It says, "Don't you ever touch the announcers. If you touch the announcers, you will be fined."
That's absolutely true.
Because you touch the announcer, what are you doing? If you lost your mind, first of all, the announcer was going to put you over. Why would you screw with him?
Right.
Exactly. That's a really interesting point. These are the guys, that in many cases they're making you, they're creating you, and to put your hand on on someone who's largely responsible for your career, it's not really a smart move, is it, Dan?
No, not in the slightest. And if I can expand, that's actually something that's come up in conversation before, and it's a point I've made on the show in the past, is the style. As Benny mentioned, Gordon could make a burning log sound interesting. I would be hard pressed, even hearing his voice in my head, to hear him make some of the matches today sound believable, because they are so fantastical. To the bell rings and you're instantly doing flips and power bombs through tables and all this. Like you said, the announce table gets destroyed sometimes multiple times a show because they'll rebuild it during the commercial break. I would be hard pressed that even his amazing skill could salvage some of the product today.
Yeah, but you also have at the same time, he said, all they're doing is acrobats. They're just out there. Dad never said that they weren't still, beefed up and all that other stuff, because my late husband said he thought the whole thing was fake, and this is when he first met Dad. And Dad's head flipped around. He goes, "What?" And he goes, "Well, it can't be real. You don't think it's real? Come on. We'll just go down to the gym right now, and you can just work out with them in the ring." Oh, no, and Bob just backed away. Like, no, wrong move.
Yeah.
Not scoring points with your father-in-law at that stage of the game. But he said, all they do is they do flips. There's no wrestling. When they first started, when Dad and Eddie and the rest of them, these guys wanted to wrestle. There was still some, the Grecian wrestling still in there in the moves. You look at people like Luthez, and Don Curtis and Jack Briscoe and Jerry Briscoe. Those guys did moves. They did wrestling moves, but all this other stuff, flip them over. It's so choreographed that there are times when I have watched it that I sit back and go, does anybody else see that they're like off in their timing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Exactly.
So it's not believable then.
I'm so happy to hear you mention Luthez and Jack Briscoe and people like that. I met your father in 1999. And by the way, this is Angelo again, Pam.
Yes,
I met your father in 1999. I had a picture taken with him. And
I have that picture.
Yeah. And by the way, that was, you and I have talked about this before. Let me, before I tell my story, Pam, I want to back up and talk about you and I a little bit. In the interest of full disclosure, Pam is here almost a full year late. We actually spoke about having you on the show previously, but again, in the interest of full disclosure, you're a school teacher, and at the time, this was before COVID, and at the time, you could only do weekends, and we don't record on weekends, so it became very difficult to get our schedules together, but we always maintained an online presence with each other and a friendship, and quite frankly, we have a lot in common.
Yes, we do.
I met your father. In fact, the people watching this video, when they see it tonight, they're going to see your father and I together, and I looking a lot younger, and Gordon Solie looking as handsome as ever. That was the only photo he took that day, and he was only there for that day. Your dad wasn't feeling well when he arrived, and he came down from his room. He kind of walked around a bit. I pulled him to the side, and we did something that he doesn't do a lot, that he didn't do a lot. We spoke about everything but wrestling. We talked a lot about other things. And my niece, who happened to be with me, had the camera. And I knew that your father was kind of on the downside and he was looking tired. And I said, Nancy, my niece Nancy, I said, Nancy, take a picture of us. And I'm glad I got that photo because it ended up being one of the last. Yeah. It ended up being like one of, if not the last photo of Gordon Solie that I have, and with me in it. because he went to the Great Ring in the Sky several months later. But I will tell you, that man accomplished something in life that a lot of people don't do, or don't get a chance to do anyway. He made his voice, singularly his voice, recognizable universally. There are only two people in my life that have done that: Wolfman Jack and Gordon Solie. You can't mistake that. Yeah, you can't mistake that gravelly, no nonsense voice of Gordon Solie, and likewise the gravelly, albeit smoker's voice of Wolfman Jack. But those two voices were the soundtrack of my life growing up. When I heard Gordon Solie's voice, I knew it was time to leave the dinner table and go in front of the TV. That was it. It was time for wrestling. It was time for wrestling, absolutely. And so when I spoke to him that day, and we spoke for about 45 minutes or so, and like I say, I knew he was getting tired, so I just kind of let him go. But he loved to talk about anything but wrestling. I got this sense, and maybe you and I can talk about this, Pam. I got the sense that he could have cared two shits for wrestling. I really got that
yes
sense.
And no.
He really didn't care.
Yeah, but yes and no. I mean, at that stage of his life, he wasn't feeling well. You're right, and he saw the product that he so adored. Please understand, this was not a job to my dad. This was his career. This was his life. He loved to go to work every day in front of that mic, in front of the squared circle. I mean, that was my dad, and his voice was, he was having trouble with his voice. There was just all kinds of stuff, and he knew what was coming. Yeah. And I think that depressed him. Now, the one thing you did touch on, he loved to talk, period.
Oh boy. I'll vouch for that, Pam.
It's not something, it's something apparently that I inherited it as well, because it was always written up in my report cards: talks too much. But with my dad, he was like, he knew so much about everything. I mean, whatever you brought up, he could talk about, he could expand on it. He could tell stories that went with it. The last 2 years of his life, I was a primary caregiver, and we had a routine set up, and I would call him every night, and we would talk, sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours, but we talked about everything but wrestling. We had political discussions, educational, psychological. We talked the gamut of stuff. So for what you did, you scored high points with him on that.
I will tell you that I was utterly fascinated at his knowledge of wines. He knew so. You know what I'm talking about then.
My father was a
so much about
wines.
Oh my God, yes. He knew so much about different wines and the kind of grapes that they use, and how much sugar you ferment it with, and all this other crazy kind of stuff.
Well, he was an encyclopedia of information. Now I'll be very upfront and honest. My father had a very he had a serious drinking problem, which a lot of people have alluded to. There's one website out there that drives me crazy, but the man is trying to change his name, but it's called Gordon Solie's Liver. And I'm like, why would you do that, And I wrote him a very nice email, and the guy said, okay, I'm going to change it. I said, just out of respect for my family, Yeah, we all knew he had a drinking problem, and Dad knew. And he regretted it. But
well, be that as it may, look, there are any number of people in or out of the wrestling business, or any business for that matter, who may drink a bit too much or may have a problem That never affected, however, his work.
No,
And
it
he
didn't.
never, and his, and it's in full disclosure, Pam, it's the truth.
It is.
It was well known that Gordon, liked to bend the elbow with the boys, and sometimes without them. But it never affected his ability to call, his ability to, what's the word I'm looking for, Benny? To emphasize what was important in a match, or a program coming up, or a series of live events. Dan, you want to pick up where we are? Maybe talk a little bit about the wrestling product, and you and Benny can have at it a bit.
Can I interject something real quick?
Yeah, absolutely, Pam. Sure.
My father could probably drink most people under the table, and he would smile at you and say that. But I watched the man down vodka with a splash of cranberry, doubles. I would have been on the floor, okay? And he would have, he'd have 4 of them, and then go back to the station when he was doing radio and get on there and not miss a beat. You wouldn't know that he'd been drinking. He was amazing. I mean, it was like he just...
Pam, I will tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, in that photo that we have, you can't see his hand, but there's a vodka and cranberry in his hand with a little red straw sticking out of it.
Yep.
I know, because he came to me right from the bar.
That would be my dad.
I guess he had just landed. He went up to his room. They took his bags up. He came back down. He went right to the bar. By the way, this is 10 o'clock in the morning. And the bar, it was a 24-hour bar in the hotel. So the bar was open all day, all night. And people were, and not just him, and just in fairness to Gordon Solie, there were a lot of people that were feeling pretty good 10 o'clock in that morning. Including yours truly, by the way. Including yours truly.
I think he traced a lot of it back. There was he would tell you that he suffered from depression at times, and I think that was he was self-medicating a lot of times, and but he loved his vodka, and yes, he loved his wines.
Yeah,
he could tell you the difference in the wines. So,
but like I said, we had quite the conversation about his knowledge of wines. It was fascinating that that he could take just about any subject and converse intellectually and intelligently on it.
He'd make a good.
Benny,
a good?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
He would make a good fact checker on Facebook, I suppose. Anything, he knows it.
Yeah.
Anyway, my bad.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. I'm going to go to Dan. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to ask, we were talking about the product, and it comes up a lot. One of the things that comes up on this show often is the narrative that the best people in wrestling, the characters in wrestling, are the real you turned up to 11. I'm wondering, listening to the commentary from racing and the backstage, some of the backstage work, and seeing some of the interviews in later life and the commentary, where did the line blur between the man you knew as your father and the man we would see on TV calling matches?
That's a good question. He was the same guy. I mean, I don't even know how to answer that. Did he have a persona that he put out there? Well, what you saw was what you get, okay? That was the real Gordon Solie, no matter what. Because I remember going to the, St. Valentine's Day Massacre in Tampa back before he passed away.
Oh, yeah.
And they were honoring him, and he was tired because he'd been at another show earlier. And I said, Dad, you don't really have to do this. And he goes, I know. He says, but he needs to sell tickets. And he's talking about Vince. And he goes, he's using me to sell tickets. But he went out there and he was Gordon. He was my dad. I never saw that there was a line.
And that's another thing too. He had this. He never forgot what this business did for him, and that it created. It gave him this whole other career. Really, his name alone on a marquee or on a poster could move tickets. Now you're talking about a guy that's an announcer moving tickets. But in Gordon Solie's case, he could do it. We had a guy here the other night, Pam, and my guys will tell you. We had a guy here the other night, Gary Michael Capetta.
I know who he is, yes.
Yeah, so you know who Gary is. He's a good friend of mine. And he was here the other night. And, and we talked about, what a person's reputation means in this business, and without your reputation you have nothing. There's nothing without it. Gordon Solie's reputation from day one was pristine. To the very end it was pristine. No one could ever pin anything nefarious or untoward on him, or in any way smudge his good name or his record. And that's something to be very proud of. You can't say that about a lot of people, especially in the wrestling business, because as you know, having been around this business for most of your adult life, it's a shit show. Let's just call it what it is. It's a shit show. And one guy that knows a lot about the people's reputations in this business is our guy, Ben Scala from Ocala. Benny, why don't you talk about the reputation Gordon had among the masses?
Well, I can tell you, just as a reference point, I grew up in Long Island. I started watching wrestling in 1968. And back then it was Capital Wrestling from Washington, D.C. And the announcer was Ray Morgan. And I think after that was Chili Billy, Bill Cardell. Yeah, and then after that was Vince McMahon, and I guess we got cable on Long Island from Cablevision in about 1975, and all of a sudden I get the show Championship Wrestling from Florida.
Yeah, boy.
And I see this guy Gordon Solie.
Yeah, boy.
And just like the contrast to what I was used to what to what I saw with him. And just the minute he said suplex, I lost it. Like, it's like, what the hell? Like, this guy's great. Yeah. And then I guess he said something about a salto. And I had never heard that hold called before. And just the way he went through the match, I was mesmerized right from the first minute. And, go ahead, Angelo, you want to say something?
Yeah, no, I'm chomping at the bit here, Benny. I'm glad that you brought that up. And I'm going to throw it right back to you. And Dan is laughing at me because I promised I wasn't going to interrupt tonight, but I did anyway.
I'm not a kid, though.
Gordon would often educate himself. And Pam, was this a deliberate thing on your dad's part? He would literally educate himself in the technical jargon of what a move was, a salto,
yes,
or a suplex instead of a suplex.
Yep.
He took a great deal of pride.
Well, and he pronounced it that way for a reason, because he wanted to draw attention. I mean, he knew exactly that people would go, "What did he just say?" Just like
exactly,
exactly. It definitely worked for me.
Yeah, and the other part too is. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I was going to say, it definitely got my attention.
Well, and the other part too is he could tell you the history of wrestling. I mean, he didn't have to have a book in front of him. He'd read it. Yes, he was very well versed. He took an anatomy class. He wanted to know what it was like to be in the ring as a wrestler. So Coach John Heath worked him out in the ring. Dad came out saying, "I don't want to do that." I'll stay behind the desk. But he said, "How can I call anything, again, if I don't know what they're going through?"
That's a valid point, Dan. What do you think?
No, that's fair enough. That's one of the biggest complaints people have about modern commentary, especially some of the indie the smaller smaller shows, is it's obvious the commentators aren't from the wrestling business. These are either guys that are talkers or maybe just general, some local music radio jockey who doesn't know the business. They can't get moves right. They can't get names right. And it just sounds, it hurts the product. And I hate to use the word, but it makes it sound fake because it's obvious the announcers aren't really there or aren't really invested in what they're watching.
That's the best word. Dad was invested in it all the way. I mean,
that's an interesting choice of words, Dan. Fake, especially considering that the person most credited with the legitimacy of wrestling is Gordon Solie. He's the one guy, I think, across the board and across all promotions. By the way, the fact that he was not only a no-nonsense kind of announcer, but he was the announcer for the voice of one of the most credible organizations around, the National Wrestling Alliance, before, all the show busy stuff came into play.
Before it became entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And Pam, I'm glad that you know where I'm going with this. What is the one thing, if you had to call bullshit on something, what's the biggest misnomer about Gordon Solie, either personally or professionally? What's the one thing that everybody gets wrong?
Oh, let's see. I've read lots of stuff that gets wrong.
I'll give you I'll throw a little example at you. It's been said. It has been said and speculated that, and maybe Dan and Benny can jump into this one with you. It's been suggested that Gordon and Dusty Rhodes did not like each other. And I say this because I'm looking at a photo right now behind me where Dusty and your dad are just shit-eating, grinning ear to ear at each other.
They both have been drinking.
Oh. Okay.
There was no. Okay. No. Here's the deal, and that's probably a good one, a good segue into this. But he and Dusty, business-wise, they had some real falling outs. I mean, you have to understand, when Eddie died, everything fell apart. I mean,
yeah.
And people tried to move in and take over and be the boss, and they were not Eddie, and I've said this 100 times. My dad and Eddie were like brothers.
I heard that, and I don't want you, actually, I don't want you to get too far into that, Pam, because I want to explore that line of questioning about Eddie Graham and your father, because that's a whole.
Back to, it is. It's a whole thing by itself.
Yeah, it really is. So.
And yes and no on Dusty, I mean.
Yeah.
At one time, I think they were, but then Dusty was into Dusty. Dad was into pushing everybody over the top,
There was, that had been, and I don't know, and my guys will say, I've been around this business a long time, a very, very long time. And I know everybody. And making a phone call, I was talking to a dear friend of mine last night for 2 hours, talking about Dusty and Gordon. He said they did not like each other, but they had incredible mutual respect for each other.
Good, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because they both knew that their name appeal had a financial draw element to it. Nobody was going to turn on wrestling and stay very long if they didn't hear Gordon Solie's voice coming out of their television. Likewise, they weren't going to stay very long if they didn't see Dusty Rhodes in the ring with someone.
Well, it's not just Dusty in the ring. If you watch Dusty and my dad at the announcer's table, a lot of Georgia Championship Wrestling. Oh my gosh! I mean, they played off each other beautifully,
Oh my God!
Dusty standing up there, Yeah, Dusty standing up there going, Garden.
God told
Yeah, Garden.
Solie, and
Absolutely.
So I mean, they knew where their bread was buttered. They weren't stupid, but it had a lot to do with the business stuff. That probably hurt Dad more than anything.
Dan,
and that's probably people don't even realize my dad was a very sensitive person.
I believe that.
People don't even know.
Yeah, I believe that, having had the chance to speak to him. I actually believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I also get the feeling that he was incredibly insecure.
He always said there's going to be somebody bigger, better, faster, and smarter than you, so you better be the top of your game.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people thought he was stuck up. I remember somebody telling me that once, your father's so arrogant. And I'm like, what? Well, you must not know the same guy I do.
That's a perfect lead-in for you, Dan the Man. Again, one of those misnomers, that somehow, for some reason, Gordon Solie was a stuffed shirt. He was far from a stuffed shirt. I am told, Dan the Man, and maybe you and Pam can get into this, but I am told by a little birdie that he had a wicked-ass sense of humor. Especially when he had a couple of vodka and cranberries in him.
Just enough cranberry juice to make sure the liquid in the glass wasn't clear anymore.
Exactly. You have no idea. In fact, there's stuff I can't even go into because it was.
That's funny.
It's crazy that he would have that kind of reputation, because watching him and listening to him, that authentic. And then when you touched on the fact that he didn't know the results, there was an authentic aura about him. Like it was yes, there was professionalism. Yes, he made it exciting, but there was also that little tweak of fan that came through when the right person won, or if a moment in a match was really good, you could tell that genuine.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, for saying that, because he came across like a fan.
Yeah, knew what he was doing. You know why? My father was not an athlete. He used to say, my gosh, he goes, he tried to show off for a girl one time, and he thought it was really cool, so he got down. He had a bicycle, a brand new bicycle, and so he's like showing off, and he decides he's gonna pedal with his knees and all this other stuff. I mean, he ended up wiping out. He couldn't play baseball. I mean, he wasn't a football player. I mean, he was none of that stuff. So he admired those guys. He admired that they could keep their bodies in that kind of shape. But he was also this kid that grew up listening on the radio to the boxers out of Madison Square Gardens, and he listened to them call the matches, and that's what he wanted to do. He made that decision when he was like 7 or 8 years old. That's going to be me. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't an athlete. He was short, and he wasn't beefy at all. And I don't even think.
Well, Pam, if it was any consolation to you, sweetheart, in that photo you have, your father's actually 1 inch taller than I am. So he was taller
you're both a lot taller than me.
He was, exactly 1 inch taller than I am. So you can have bragging rights. He was taller than somebody. Go ahead, Dan, man.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead. You were saying?
Who? Me?
You. Yeah.
Oh. No, I just think people they wonder, what's this skinny little guy, this little short guy? But he was fireball when he wanted to be. And yes, he had a keen sense of humor. He had the quickest wit, and he was full of sarcasm.
Oh boy.
I mean, you don't survive in the house unless in fact my own children know it. I mean, and my grandchildren know it, that they were a witness to it.
And Benny, this kind of goes off of something you were saying earlier. You think about Dusty Rhodes, Andre the Giant, Mr. Wrestling 2, some of the greatest either interview or on-screen moments. It was your father holding the microphone, and I don't think some of those moments would have worked if he was bigger and slower with it, because he could bang out the questions. He could bounce, back when nothing was scripted, he could hold his own in the interview segment. And when you have these guys that kind of towered over him, and he's still, well, how could you do that? And what did you think? Or, the match next week, and it's no disqualification, and he could bam, bam, bam the questions. He appeared professional, but he never appeared intimidated, which just gave it such an aura of, these larger, that made the people on TV look larger than life. And I don't think anybody else could pull that off.
That's really interesting, Dan. He was never intimidated, despite the fact, here's a guy that could have broke with a punch. I stood next to him, for quite some time. He was not a muscular guy, Nope. In fact, he was built a lot like I am, except the son of a gun was taller than anybody an inch. But I digress. Benny, let's talk about that. And I want Benny to chime into this. I'm going to give you a lead over here. I have a photo behind me. It's a really interesting picture, Pam. It's a picture of your father, Gordon Solie, standing ringside. And I don't know anything about this picture. That's why I got to go to my historian here, Big Ben Scala. He's standing ringside next to one Vincent Kennedy McMahon that looks like a WWF show somewhere, Benny. What do you think? What am I looking at, Benny?
The only thing I could think of is maybe when, what do they call it? Black Saturday? When after Vince McMahon bought the TV time on WTBS. That's the only thing I can think of.
Would that have been it, Pam? Do you know which photo I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know exactly which one you're talking about. I think that was just before all that went down, actually around that time. But see, Vince came to Dad and said, we really want you to be part of it, because there was such a backlash. People tuned into wrestling, and my dad wasn't there, and people were, the letters that people wrote to the station, they were appalled. What did you do with our announcer, and what's going on? And they didn't like Vince McMahon too much for that. So Vince came to Dad and said, hey, realizing, because Vince is a marketing person, and he said, look, I'd like for you to be part of the show, so we're willing to pay you $1,500 each time if you wear a tuxedo. My dad looked at him and he says, I don't think so. Goodbye. Walked away.
Damn.
Angelo, I don't mean to interject here. Are you talking about that picture over your right shoulder where it's the two of them in front of that blue ring?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the famous Omni show that aired on HBO that was filmed in Georgia. That was one of the early hybrid shows when the WWF WWF probably still worked with some of the territories and did their Omni specials.
And I was curious about that, because it's funny, Pam, I was going to ask you if you knew whether or not Vince was going to make your dad an offer to come over and work for him, because I heard that you mentioned $1,500 per episode. I heard crazy numbers, as low as 500 and as much as 5,000. But I've heard some crazy numbers thrown around. I do know that Gordon basically told Vince to go pound sand up his ass.
Well, I was being polite, but yeah, he did. He said he wanted nothing to do with it, and Vince tried to. That one particular show, I think that's when Vince decided he wanted to be the announcer. And one of the things that Vince lost, and I noticed it over the years, is that he kept beefing himself up, and he started looking more and more like the wrestlers rather than, the announcer or, the promoter, which takes away from the guys. And there are some remarkable people that, work in the industry too. I'm not taking anything away from them. But Dad said, this is not going to work. He said, no. Those were two egos that were not going to work together.
Yeah, pretty clearly. Benny, chime in over here, brother. I was going
to mention Javier Oist,
daughter.
Very good friends, Javier, who we've had on the show within the last couple of weeks, actually. And Javier lives in El Salvador, but he lived in Florida for a brief amount of time when he was younger. And what got him hooked on wrestling was I guess he was fooling around with his TV set, messing around with the UHF, and came across the Championship Wrestling with Florida show. And at that precise moment was the angle of when Kevin Sullivan had attacked superstar Billy Graham.
Oh, yeah.
And put him out of commission. And they went to this photo of Billy Graham chained up in the desert with his eye taped up. I'll never forget that because I saw that myself. I was mesmerized. And he used the term, I mean, he said a lot of things, Billy Graham, but he said, break the chains that bind me. And
oh, my gosh.
That's what hooked Javier. And he's been a wrestling fan ever since then. And I was going to ask, like, did your dad have any input into these storylines?
Yes. Yes, he wrote a lot of them. With Championship Wrestling from Florida. He not only wrote the storylines, he wrote the ads in the paper that they had, the weekly bulletin that they had. I mean, Dad was a writer, an amazing writer. I mean, and again, that goes along with his announcing abilities. But he had a schedule set up, and he'd follow that schedule, boom, 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 because nobody told him what to say. He said what he wanted to say and needed to say, so he wrote it down.
Yeah.
Yes, they did.
We talked about that, Pam. Oh, I'm so thrilled that you brought this up, because boy, that's going to open up a Pandora's box. We talked about that spontaneity that existed, that realism that existed, as soon as, and this is just my opinion because I'm going to spout off for a minute. As soon as they started scripting stuff and making it sound plastic and phony, then there were no need for people like Gordon Solie. There were no need for a guy like that to like speak from the heart. When you start writing everything and it all sounds robotic, then you've lost your product. Gordon had the ability to keep you and hold you. And, and to use Benny's analogy, to chain you to that TV. And you didn't want to break those chains, Tune
in next week for the next episode. I want it to be bound to my
TV, brother.
Yeah, but you got to think that the storyline was the most crucial part of it, I mean,
exactly.
And sometimes the storyline got taken off because the guys would come out of the ring and they were ticked at each other, or they were ticked going into the ring because they took it to heart. I mean, it's a golden age gone.
That's really interesting. Has your father ever confessed to you being pulled into someone's real life heat?
But there was stuff that went down, but
okay,
I mean, he wrote a couple of stories, and I'm not getting into it.
No, we'll save that for the adult version of the show at some other point.
One time he had to go to court.
Oh, well, no, we're not even going to get into that one.
No,
yeah,
please, I don't.
I actually know that one, Pam.
Mm-hmm.
I actually know that one. We're not even going to touch that right now.
Benny, Thank you.
No problem, kiddo. Absolutely. Benny, go ahead, brother.
Just with your dad's style, the way he was so low key with that voice and he was so analytical. I'm a huge baseball fan. I could have easily have imagined him calling a baseball game on the radio. Did he ever entertain going into other sports?
Okay, now I'm going to make you laugh. The name Gennard, which is his birth name, or his middle name, whatever, Gennard Francis, it belonged to the Gennard brothers. One played for the White Sox, and one played for the Minnesota Twins. And my grandfather, my dad's dad, was a big baseball freak. And that's how my dad became known as Gennard. He actually has somebody's last name as his first name. And it was Bubba Gennard. And then I forget the other brother's name, but I think he was named after Bubba. But they were, I think, in the World Series. Both of them at one point were in the World Series. Like I said, my grandpa was a big fan. Dad hated baseball.
I heard that.
My husband stayed one night when got out of the hospital, when Dad got out of the hospital, and the Bulls were on TV for basketball, or the Cubs, or I don't remember which one it was, but my dad says, "Don't leave him here again with me." I said, "What?" And he goes, "I am not watching another one of those basketball games or one of those baseball games." All he did was jump up and down the whole time he was here. And he could watch football. He loved football, but he had no desire with baseball or with basketball. So, yeah.
I heard
he thought
that.
baseball was boring.
Well, Benny, I gave you the first set of questions. Dan, I'm going to give you the last set of questions, and then we will say goodnight to Pam. Go ahead, brother.
Well, I mean, really, it's been a pleasure talking to you and going into the detail. And we kind of touched on it before with the announcing, and obviously you covered racing. I'm curious if you knew, or if there had ever been stories, if the wrestling business hadn't have come along, what would your father have ended up doing?
He had a variety of jobs. Radio.
I think I know.
Callback. What, writing?
Can I tell you what I think he would have ended up doing, Pam?
Go for it.
I think he would have ended up writing.
Yeah. Well, he was a writer for the Lakeland Ledger.
Yeah, I think he would have ended up writing. A lot of people don't know this, and this is a great Christmas gift to give everyone right now. The knowledge that you can still now purchase a book of poetry written by Gordon Solie. It's still available. It is available on, I believe, Amazon or a number of...
Amazon.
Yeah,
it's out of print. It's out of print, by the way, but it is available, yes.
Yeah, you can still get it.
Are you talking about Gordon Solie, Something Left Behind?
The book of poetry, right?
Yeah, that's the big book, yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
That's what he left me when he passed away. He says, "You'll know what to do with this."
Yes.
And I did.
Yep. And that's an amazing gift. If you want to give someone the gift that keeps on giving, that's it. It's a book of poetry and inspiration and
stories.
A lot of insightful thoughts about this coming from this man who you know as just an announcer, so-called just an announcer. He was a lot more than just an announcer. He was a father and a personality, a character, if you want to call him that. He was
very much. He had his thinking was very Socratic, and he was a deep thinker, sometimes an overthinker, but very sensitive. And some of the stories in there, they'll just tug at your heart, and some of them are like, whoa. We are but 7 days from Rome. I mean, it's like that was written back in the 70s, and it's today. Mm-hmm. Great pictures, a lot of tremendous pictures in that book that we put together with the poems or with the stories. So
and I want people to check that out. It is available. It's still on Amazon. So go there, get it. It's Pam Allyn. And just briefly, if you can, and we've talked about it on the show before, but talk about how the Solie Chronicles came to be.
Solie Chronicles, it was actually Scott Teal brought that up and said, you need to put your dad's life into to print, and because he had such an interesting life. So that's where we ended up. It starts from the day he was born, and it's a biography, and it has some tremendous interviews in there of so many different stars from the days, and it was a lot of fun to do, and I learned a lot. Stories that my father would pray in heaven, going, "What in the world, girl?" But I was very cautious of certain ones. So yes, and both of those are still available. Scott Teal has the Solie Chronicles.
And available on Crowbar Press. I should tell you, Pam, Scott is a very, very good friend of the show. He's a good friend of mine personally. We like
man.
Scott here a lot. He's a good guy. He's one of those good guys, you know.
Yes, he is.
He really is. I will tell you that's been my Christmas gift to have you on the show tonight. I have wanted to do this for a year now. We talked about doing this. Finally, we got to do it. And I would love to have you back maybe in 2021. And, you know, I'll give you a few drinks. Well, yeah, what I'll do is I'll give you a few drinks. I'll have my guys drink early that day, and we can get into some of the raunchy stories. I know Benny Scal is up for it.
Oh yeah.
Well, Pam, I am not my father, but I hope I have not embarrassed him or anyone in this. Oh my God! No,
let me tell you something, and I'll tell you straight from the heart. I'm honored to call you my friend. You are an amazing tribute to your father. Wrestling fans worldwide, anyone who's ever had the pleasure and privilege to see Gordon Solie or to hear his amazing voice was given a gift. And that gift is immortal. That gift is immortalized now and forever on film and video and in photographs. His likeness will always be made available, especially on this show, where we preserve the history of the great personalities from our dying and beloved sport.
Absolutely.
So, until next year, young lady, when I see you, remain happy and healthy. And thank you, and I love you. Thanks for joining us.
Love you guys too, from the heart. Be
Thank
good.
you so much.
Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Take care, honey. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Remarkable.
Oh, yeah, that was crazy. That was great.
What a great conversation with Pam Allyn, guys. That was remarkable.
Absolutely.
Benny, Dan, what do you think? Talk to me, kid.
Benny, you brought up a point about the announcers. Why don't you say that again?
Yeah, it's like, I think it's so cool that we had Gary Capetta last week, and then we had the daughter of, like, probably arguably the greatest commentator ever back to back. And, like, we, in both cases, we didn't even scratch the surface. We could easily have them both back for 4 more episodes.
Benny, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I have a Christmas surprise for you.
All right.
I promised a Christmas surprise. So here it is. I confirmed last night this guest will be joining us in January, but I confirmed last night yet another in-ring personality turned microphone guru. We're going to have none other than Gorilla Monsoon's daughter, Valerie Morella.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Talked to Val via Facebook. She's actually a friend of my wife. And what are you laughing at, Dan?
No, I think it's great how many connections you have. That's awesome.
Well, brother,
it's a whole New Jersey thing, though, right?
Right? Yeah, of course.
They all know me.
You throw.
I know them and they know me. It's all good.
Throw a rock from the Jersey arena and you're going to hit somebody famous in wrestling history.
Pretty much, yeah, absolutely. Well, Benny, you're from this area. A stone's throw from the Garden and everybody lives here.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because Gorilla was what, Willingboro, New Jersey?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Called him the Willingboro Giant. What a nice man he was too. Great guy. Yeah, his daughter Valerie. She's a beautiful young lady. Tell you what, though, she's got her daddy's attitude.
Good.
Bless her heart. So she's going to be with us in January. Valerie Morella, the Gorilla's daughter. And hi, honey. My wife. She looks so beautiful. Yeah, I'm telling the world now that you're friends with Val. And have been for years. Yes. Dan's laughing at you.
I'm not laughing at her.
So the entire East Coast is laughing at us right now. Anyway, except for Benny in Florida, he's mesmerized.
I've been friends with Val for over 20 years.
I know. Did you hear that, World? She said she's friends with Val for 20 years.
There you go.
Oh, my God. I got a hell of an edit tonight. Got a good edit tonight. Benny, you are the man with the script. You got it. It's your turn to tell everybody who our sponsor is.
Oh, okay. Well, let me do that. All right. Here we go.
And I'll try not to lose my shit again.
Yeah, hopefully I don't get arrested here. In these trying times of Corona, you still want to have a primo bona. Especially now, 'tis the season of Yule. You want to have the nicest tool. Just head on over to manscaped.com. You're guaranteed to be the coolest OM. That's HOMME, like OM.
I know what it is. Yes.
All right. You know, with the Lawnmower 3.0's nick-free head, you'll have the #1 sack on Santa's sled.
Oh,
so get that Lawnmower 3.0, and you'll be the desire of every hope you have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. And just go over to manscaped.com, type in the promo code Wrestling Future for a generous 20% discount.
oh my God.
Manscaped.com for the best Christmas balls hanging on the tree.
Oh,
Amazing.
God bless us, everyone.
Tiny.
Have a great Christmas, everybody. We'll see you next year. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.